The next part would be mine. And today we're going to talk about the Temple of Literature, Văn miếu quốc tử giám. First, we'll go through the table of contents. It'll be mainly the two parts divided from the questions that I got. The first one is the Temple of Literature back then, and the second was some related knowledge about the temple. So to the first part, question number one, how had Vietnamese people learned before the school was built? Regarding the location, Vietnamese people back then would learn in the most convenient places, such as the communal house yard, the temple yard, or the teacher's house, which is sân đình, sân chùa, hoặc là nhà của thầy đồ. And actually, during the Northern domination period, there were some Han Mandarins who had taught our people to know Chinese characters, but well, just some. And before that, we didn't have the ability to learn like officially. And due to the Northern domination, we lost our own ancient writing. So maybe that was the reason why our people called the warlord Si Xie, Thái thú sĩ nhiếp, as Nam Bang học tổ, which I believe means the ancestor of the teaching profession in the South. The next question, when, why, and by whom the Temple of Literature was built. So first, it was built in 1070 at the time of Emperor Lý Thánh Tông, and its purpose was to, it was dedicated to Confucius. And Văn miếu is short for Văn Tuyên Tương miếu, which is Temple of Prince Xuân. And Prince Xuân is the posthumous name of Confucius. So we can say that the way that we translate the temple right now as the Temple of Literature is a mistranslation. And actually, it should be named after Temple of Confucius. And 6 years later, in 1076, it was the Quốc tử giám was built behind the temple during the reign of Lý Nhân Tông, and its purpose was to educate the bureaucrats, nobles, royalty, and other members of the elite. It soon after became Vietnam's Imperial Academy, a school for top academics shortly after. So you can see that is one of the gates of the Temple of Literature, and this is inside of the Imperial Academy. And that is Huê Văn Pavilion. You see the circle for the sky, the square for the earth, and that is kind of like a model of the temple from afar, like from air. Question 3, who were accepted to learn at this temple? Like all or just some qualified students? Well, at first, as I has mentioned, when it was first built, it was only for members of the elite, such as princes or nobles, etc., that can study here. But later on in 1253, Quốc tử giám was then, I believe, under the Trần Thái Tong's dynasty. Then in the Imperial Academy was expanded as National Academy to accept the civilian children, but who had excellent academic abilities. And because most students back then had passed the regional exam, which is T.Nhuận, before the enrollment of the academy. So what did students back then learn at that school? Like for subjects, for books, for writing script, etc. Like, do they study the same what we are studying today, or it was something else? So during the course of study at the academy, the students focus on the two main parts, which is discussion of the literature, and they also wrote poetry as well. And they had textbooks that are printed on paper with both Chinese and Gnome script. And the subjects back then were mostly about Chinese philosophy, and Chinese history. So these are some of the books that I have found, and I will say this in Vietnamese. So this is Cử thư, Đại học, Luận ngữ, Mạnh tử, Ngũ kinh, Kinh thư, Kinh thi, Kinh thư, Kinh lễ, Kinh dịch, and Kinh Xuân Thu. So you will see that is Đại học, the Great Study, that is the 4 books, that is the 5 pre-Confucian classics, Từ thư and Ngũ kinh, and some others. And they also learn Chinese poetry. So you can see this is a very famous poem that I've put here of Lý Bạch. So yeah. To the second part of the presentation, which is some other related knowledge about the temper of literature. The first, why were turtles used as pedestals for the stone stelae? What is the significance of the stone stelae? Like, yeah, and at the temple, and how many have been built, and how many remains today? So the construction of the stone stele began in 1484, which is the Emperor Lê Thánh Tông had erected the steles to honor talent and encourage study. And the reason why he chose the turtle was that the turtle is one of the 4 holy creatures, and it also symbolizes longevity and wisdom. However, only 82 steles remain today in a total of 116. Yeah. And they depict the names and birthplace of more than 1,300 graduates of 82 triennial royal exams. And those exams were between, so 81 exams were held by the Lê dynasty, and 1 was held by the Mac dynasty. And they also record the Mandarins who were tasked with organizing the exams. Yeah, so about its like significance, the ancient Chinese engravings on each stele praise the merits of the monarch and cite the reasons for holding royal exams. They also, display the dynasty's attitude towards the training and employing of the talented individuals. And they were overall a valuable historical resource for the study of philosophy, history, culture, education, society, and sculpture in Vietnam. The stelae were inscribed on UNESCO's Memory of the World Register in 2011. So you can see here are the turtle stelaes, and these were one of the engravings in there, including the sun and the dragon and some other symbols. So yeah. To question 2, we will present some of the temple's functions in different historical periods and nowadays. So yeah, we can see the timeline here. Firstly, in 1070, it was built to honor Confucius. And then six years later, it was the Imperial Academy was built to educate members of the elite. From that point of time to 1779, it remained open. But yeah, and it soon expanded as National Academy to accept those who had excellent academic abilities. In 1802, I believe is under the Nguyen's dynasty, Moriaks founded the Huế capital, where they established a new imperial academy. That is when the academy at the Hanoi Temple lost its permanence and became the school of Hoài Đức district. And the next timeline is in 1906. It was registered as a monument historique under the French protectorate. And in the 2 years of 1920 and 1947, some campaigns of restoration were pursued. And in the period of from 1945 to 1954, the French has demolished parts of the temple to make additional room for the St. Paul Hospital during the war times. So when you heard about education in Vietnam, I think that you will, or like when you go to the Temple of Literature, you will heard his name very many times. That is Chu Văn An. And we often said him to be like Vạn Thế Sư Biểu, which is a teacher of all times. So he was a Confucian, a teacher, a high-ranking Mandarin of the Chen dynasty, and he in his early life, he was famous for like a really straightforward man who passed the doctoral examination, which is Thái học sinh, but he refused to become a Mandarin. And instead, he opened a school in Huỳnh Cung village in Thanh Trì. And he later on taught many talented and successful students for the nation, such as Phạm Sư Mạnh or Lê Quát, the two high-ranking Mandarins at that time. And there's also a fun fact about those two students of him, is that when visiting him, those two Mandarins who used to be his students still observed very high etiquette and so respect towards Chu Văn An. That is later on being explained as for his like high morals, standards, and excellence in teaching, as well as for him being a very like distinguished man, not seeking for fame or wealth, kind of. And after that, he became a teacher at the Imperial Academy, where he was responsible for teaching the crown prince, who later became King Trần Hiền Tông. But he resigned and returned to his home village when the king, Trần Dụ Tông, refused his request of beheading 8 mandarins for corruption. And for the rest of his life, Chu Văn continued his teaching career and wrote books. So you can see that is an altar. This is an altar that is erected in his honor in the Temple of Literature, where he is still revered. And this right one over here is a statue of him, within the campus of Chu Văn High School. So we will also learn about kind of like a teacher, which is Confucius, and we will discuss the main contents of Confucianism and how did it affect Vietnam and Asian countries. Firstly, about Confucius, he was a Chinese philosopher who lived during the spring and autumn period in China's history. In 500 before Christ, I think. Yeah. He is credited with authoring numerous of classic texts covering all sorts of societal topics that have come to be known as Confucianism. So, yeah, what is Confucianism? In a nutshell, then, Confucianism is a complex system of social and political ethics that are based on filial piety, kinship, loyalty, and righteousness, and with particular emphasis on the importance of the family and social harmony rather than on overtly source of spiritual values. The core of Confucianism is humanistic. The teachings of Confucianism consist of several principles or virtues, and some of the most notable ones are Ren, Li, Zong, and Xiao. So Ren deals with the humanness and kindness to others. About Li, those are rights, and it would mostly focus on the politeness and understanding everybody's correct place in the social hierarchy. Yang deals with loyalty, and Xiao deals with filial piety, which promotes respect towards your elders, both the living and the dead, and your family. Together, these virtues govern people's everyday life, and overall, it was to make people better. So, how did the ideology and philosophy affect Vietnam and Asian countries? So, traditionally, cultures and countries in the East Asian culture sphere are strongly influenced by Confucianism, like in China, in Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Vietnam. You see in the right photo is Yoshima Seido in Tokyo, Japan, which is a temple of Confucius, a temple to show respect with Confucius. And in Vietnam, we have Temple of Literature, the Temple of Literature as well. And even in nowadays, we can see so many influences of Confucianism in Vietnam, like we can see at the Mid-Autumn Festival or the Tate, etc. So overall, there were still very many influences and effect of this. And I will tell you about some more. In Asian cultures, people tend to respect hierarchy and status much more than Western people, who are generally more individualistic and not too strict about social order. And in Confucianism, you are supposed to behave according to your rank and keep the society harmonious, kind of, and not according to how you feel and how you would personally want to do. And it would be one of the reasons why embarrassing yourself or others is avoided, because it breaks the harmony. It explains somehow that why Asian people sometimes have difficulties in saying no directly to someone's face. Like, yeah, so sometimes you are supposed to read between the lines if the other person is unwilling to agree with you and save them from the embarrassment of saying no. And there were also one influence of the culture of Asia that can be seen as well, which is for education. So the philosophy places great emphasis on education and on schooling. And during the old times, then good education was the only way to move up in society and to make the nation better. As a result, then great value is put on education nowadays, but the education is highly competitive as well. So, well, maybe you'll be shocked if before the exam week you encounter like very many Asian students living and sleeping in the library around the clock. And it was somehow, which in Asian countries, people still have a very high like stress of like to be competitive with others and with the rankings in their academic system. So yeah, that is the end of my presentation.